Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Appo Agbamu. I'm founder and CEO of Arvo and Arvo DEX. Arvo is a zero-commission social trading platform that enables investors and traders of different backgrounds to make profitable and timely investing decisions. And Arvo DEX is a project we're currently working on, which will allow peer-to-peer equity trading without the use of smart contracts. Before I get into Arvo DEX, I'd like to give you a brief history of the brokerage industry. Starting with Ahrvo 1.0, this predates the 1950s, and this was a period in time where transactions were carried out on paper and messengers and mailmen were needed in order to transact. This led to extremely slow settlement time, and the market closed on Wednesday. Era 2.0 coincides with the creation of central depositories and electronic accounting systems. During this time period, great innovations such as multilateral netting, which is a grouping of trades instead of having them, grouping and settlement of trades instead of having them settle individually, was one of the key innovations during this time period. And this led to settlement time being reduced to 2 minutes. Era 3.0 is what we're transitioning to now. This is a period of democratization and decentralization. To some extent, this has already happened with platforms like Robinhood or eToro providing zero-commission trading. But the problem with these platforms is that they're built on the old infrastructure. The new infrastructure is decentralized, has on-chain order matching and execution, higher post-trade liquidity due to that, and it's 24-hour trading. 24 hours, 7 days a week. So as I mentioned, some of the key issues in the market right now are the centralized structure, settlement speed, lack of access for international investors, lack of transparency, and security. But the one I want to focus on for this slide, which Arvo focuses on, is the lack of accurate analysts. A study that came out in 2016 found that from 1981 to 2016, an investor who would have bought the 10% of stocks analysts did not like would have outperformed the stocks they did like by 15% the following year. Furthermore, as an example of the lack of objectivity among Wall Street analysts, only 5% of stocks in the S&P 500 were rated to sell in 2017. And you can find the reason for this because one-third of revenue that brokerages generate come from institutional investors looking for access to the C-suite. Furthermore, analyst compensation is highly tied to not only developing but maintaining those relationships, and these are the companies that they're covering. So how does Arvo DEX solve the other issues that I mentioned? Peer-to-peer equity trading, real-time settlement and on-chain order matching system, and a real-time accounting system to reconcile accounts. The reason a lot of larger firms can't do something like this is that they use batch accounting. So even though you may have a blockchain platform that handles a transaction in real time, the values of users' accounts are only getting updated every few hours, then the blockchain benefit is mitigated. Quantity investing scores and all those other variables I touched on earlier. Arvo DEX is vertical integration of our business. As I mentioned, Arvo's already out on iOS and Android. We've been out since 2018. We've got over 10,000 users. But this is a vertical integration of the business. By building a decentralized exchange that we can run on, we're vertically integrating our business and then offering the benefits of not only offering smart equity scores and price targets, but simultaneously giving people transparent order matching and settlement on chain. So how is Arvo DEX different from tokenized platforms? Tokenized platforms, in a sense, create their own market. Arvo DEX plugs directly into the stock market because we don't tokenize assets. We take traditional assets and give a digital reflection of that, which the user then can use to transact on the blockchain. How does this help us? One, it locks us into the traditional stock market because we're able to plug into the automatic customer account transfer system and onboard assets from Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, and other traditional brokers, where if you create your own market, a user essentially has to liquidate their traditional portfolio in order to use that tokenized market. I'm not really just going to read off the bullet points, but essentially this gives us access immediately without having to do other incentives to grow the platform. Market dynamics. 60% of firms plan on using blockchain for international money transfer. Right here I want to focus on the 23% that said they want to use it for clearing, settlement, and securities. The blockchain fintech industry is growing at 70% a year, and that rate, I assume, will accelerate going forward. Over the next 5 years, expect to grow at 70%. 90%, go back. 90% of brokerage firms are categorized as small firms by FINRA. This is going to be our partner network as we build out liquidity for the network. Smaller firms are down 11% over the last 5 years, and it's typically due to high overhead costs. So by onboarding them as partners within our network, we act as a custodian, and since it's all within the same ecosystem, it'll increase liquidity going forward. Some market numbers is that the overall revenue generated by brokerages in the U.S. alone was $308 billion in 2017, and with pre-tax income of 38.2 billion. Again, ease of adoption. One thing that you'll notice is that most investors, if you have a portfolio, there's an investment policy statement that your investor has to follow. So in terms of adoption for tokenized equity platforms, adoption is probably going to be muted going forward given the legal restrictions. And when it is adopted, it will more than likely be grouped in alternative investments, which typically only makes up 0 to 10% of a portfolio. While if you look at equities, even in the most conservative portfolio, typically are about 30% of the portfolio. And then you also have questions that come into play with tokenized equity platforms. Is it taxed as a crypto or is it taxed as an equity? So here's a little background on what we've done so far. We started developing in the first quarter of 2017. Arvo 1.0 launched in the first quarter of 2018. We raised venture capital of $150,000 later on that year and followed our provisional patent, and 2.0 launched later on. In fourth quarter of 2018. AhrvoDex development is going to start on the 1st of May. We're also going to register to become a broker with FINRA on the we're going to register to become a broker with FINRA sometime during the next quarter. We plan on filing our second utility patent as well. 1.0 of our desktop version will be coming out in the second quarter of 2020, with our testnet for AhrvoDex coming out in the third quarter of 2020, and in the first quarter of 2021, with the mainnet launching in 2021, and then our API and SDK suite, which will be big for liquidity as well, because it's an easier way for other platform and blockchain or other startups to adopt our platform outside of our brokerage partners. Will help build liquidity going forward as well. I'll just let you guys dwell on this. The majority of our funds are going to be used for research and development. I do want to focus on this number here. Being a broker, we have a minimum required reserve that we have to meet, but as we grow, that number could be variable. So it could be anywhere from 5 to 15%, and then obviously it's give or take from the other areas. These are the details right here, but I really want to focus on the token. So for our ICO, we're using an ERC20 token, but the actual platform is a fork of Stellar. So we'll have a native token that runs on the platform that'll be interchangeable one for one, ultimately with the ERC20 token we're using for our ICO. Questions?
A great presentation.
Thank you.
I was just wondering could you tell a bit more about the team behind the project?
Yeah, so right now we have our CTO, his name is Prashant Das. We work with him as well, and then in terms of our development, we're really outsourcing a lot of our development right now, and then the goal is ultimately through raising these funds, we'll bring that in-house.
Any more questions?
I have two.
Sure.
What is your competitive advantage, do you think, versus other brokers? And when you are a fork of the Stellar network, does that mean your tokens are then freely tradable on the decentralized exchange?
So let me answer I'll answer can you repeat the first question first?
So what's your competitive advantage against other brokers?
Our competitive advantage against other brokers is that users are going to be rewarded for trading in Arvo coin. So say for instance you trade 100,000 in a trade, you'll get a percentage of that in Arvo coin. So instead of paying typically as you would to trade, in our case, you're getting rewarded. But More importantly, and this I think is really the value proposition of our platform, is post-trade liquidity. Right now, if you trade, it typically takes about 2 days for that trade to settle. So during that time period, you don't have access to your funds. With real-time settlement on-chain or real-time order matching on-chain, one, you make sure that you get best execution, but two, it improves post-trade liquidity. So that 2-day lag period, if you will, is cut off. And then, okay, even though at the same time you still have to worry about those funds actually being deployed, based on the amount that the person stakes in the network, a percentage of whatever value of that trade will be given to them. So if you're, let's just assume you have 3 tiers, you're in that higher tier, it gets 50 to 70% of your funds immediately available to you, where in a normal situation, once you trade, you still have to wait for the trades to settle. On the second question is yes, it would be traded on the Stellar DEX.
Jessica, please help me to understand business model a little better.
Yeah.
You should make losses over time, right?
Huh? No, so the way that the model works is that, as I mentioned, 90% of our companies, or 90% of fintech brokerages are considered small companies, right, or small brokers. So as we're going to act as a custodian for those firms. So as we custody those assets, they pay us a fee. And then we'll also make money through API and SDK integration as well. Any other questions?